So hi. So tell us your story. Where'd you grow up? So if you were, get us from high school till now, and how'd you get here?
Okay. I was born in South Florida in West Palm Beach. I grew up in the town of Lake Worth, and I graduated high school when I was 16 years old in 1982. After I graduated high school, I lived in Mexico for around a year, and I came back to the United States. After that, I joined the United States Army, and I was a military policeman, and I was originally stationed in Germany, and I returned to the United States, and I was stationed at Fort Lewis, Washington. And while I was in the Army in Washington, I was arrested and convicted of killing a drug dealer during an armed robbery. And I spent the next 17 years in prison. While I was in prison, I became a prisoner rights activist and a jailhouse lawyer. And I started the magazine Prison Legal News in 1990. And we started out at 10 hand-typed pages and with a prospective mailing list of 75 people. We just celebrated our 20th anniversary this month in May 2010. We're up to around 7,000 paid subscribers. We're a 56-page magazine, and we have around 5 or 6 full-time employees now. And we do the magazine, we do advocacy on behalf of prisoners' rights around the country, we do litigation on censorship, First Amendment and public records issues. We publish books, we distribute books, and I think that's the main thing. We also have a website, prisonlegalnews.org, which is the biggest archive of prison and jail-related news articles, court cases, and other information anywhere online.
I have 2 questions. This is so awesome. One is, what was the passion that got ignited that got you to do all this, and how in the world did you do it? Like, give us some detail. Like, how did you get where were you when you started this business, and how did you do it? Did you get a loan? Did you just write it with a pen? Give me how did it look?
The passion that ignited the business was oppression, and that raised my consciousness quite a bit. And as far as
you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, being in prison sucks.
Tell us a little bit about the oppression about it. Yeah.
I didn't like the way I was being treated. I didn't think that regardless of anything I may have done, I didn't believe I deserved to be treated in a manner that was brutal, dehumanizing, degrading, and infantilizing, I guess, for lack of a better term. And those are the reasons that I wasn't happy with my situation, and I thought I needed to do something about it. And the other thing was, it's driven me for the entire existence of Prison Legal News, is I thought that if the American public knew how people in prisons or jails were actually treated in real life, there would be a call for change and reform in our conditions of confinement. And a lot of the work that I've done since then has been about educating the public. It's been twofold. First, it's been about educating the public about the actual conditions of confinement in American prisons and jails, and secondly, it's been about educating prisoners about how to vindicate their human and civil rights through organizing and through the court system. And that's been what I've been doing.
So
as far as starting up the magazine, we had $50 when we started.
Where were you? Were you in jail when you started?
I was in prison. I was at the Clallam Bay Correction Center, which is a maximum security prison at the end of the Olympic Peninsula in Washington State. And the magazine was hand-typed on pieces of paper and sent out to an outside volunteer who then photocopied and mailed it to our first 75 prospective subscribers. Our first 3 issues were banned by Washington State prison officials, and we eventually got that ban overturned. The warden of the prison I was at the time told me that Prison Legal News wouldn't last more than 6 months because my ideas were too radical and antiquated. And anyways, that was 244 issues and 20 years ago. So,
and how'd you get your first subscribers?
We had 75 people that we thought might want to subscribe, and we sent them the magazine. And enough of them subscribed to, initially starting out, our budget was around $50 per month per issue, and that just had to cover our photocopying and our postage.
And how'd you get the 50? I mean, here's a young man in Seattle in prison in Washington. How do you do all these? How do you get 75 subscribers and enough money to?
Well, when you need $50, it's easier to come with $50 than say $50,000.
True.
So, and the subscriber list we came up from people we knew that were prisoner rights activists and supporters in and out of prison that we thought would want to subscribe, and we thought we'll send them a sample copy, see if they do, and then as far as coming with the $50,
or anything else you think would be important for someone to figure out, like, wow, I could do that.
Well, that's the thing, is that anyone can do it, and I think that especially to an extent, publishing is easier now than it was 20 years ago, in the sense there's less barriers of entry, and I think it depends on what you're looking at doing. If you're looking at opening up a daily newspaper where you have to invest $300 million in a printing press or a printing plant, that's one thing. But I think for small alternative and niche media, I think the barriers are a lot lower now than they were then. In 1991, we switched to desktop publishing, and the big program of the day was one called Ventura, and it was like a $2,000 program, and it was pretty clunky.
Wow.
These days there's programs, I mean, they aren't great, but like Microsoft Publisher, which it's not a sophisticated program, but it's a $99 program, and it can get the job done. So.
And did you go to school to be a lawyer then?
No.
Got it.
No, I've litigated dozens of cases with around 80% win record on pretty much all conditions of confinement, but I've never been to law school. I don't plan to go. That said, I give lectures and speak at law schools around the country, including Yale, the University of California, George Washington University, and other places where I actually tell lawyers how to litigate prison and jail cases, and especially on First Amendment issues. I'm one of the top experts on prison First Amendment litigation in the United States.
So,
which isn't as impressive as it sounds. It's a really narrow niche. So, but
that's cool.
And that's because basically very few people care about the First Amendment rights of prisoners. So that's why no one bothers to study it or much less litigate it. But that's.
I'm so glad you're in our town.
Well,
this is cool. So, finally, what would you want to say to young people who are passionate about justice and civil rights, human rights, and don't quite know what's next step to take in their careers to get their passions on the ground?
One of the things is that the human rights abuses in the United States are massive. They occur at every level, from police, jails, prisons, immigration detention, the way juveniles are treated. It's a huge issue. It's something that doesn't get a lot of attention. There's a vast need and very little resources in meeting it. And one of the things is that as individuals we can feel at times that we're small, we're divided, we're overwhelmed, and part of the thing is no one person can do everything, but I think the flip side of it is that everyone can do something. And there is a lot of stuff that people can do. Here at the Human Rights Defense Center, for example, we also have a need for volunteers, and people don't need a lot of skills. We have fairly easy to do stuff, whether it's typing articles that are submitted by prisoners who don't have access to typewriters or computers, to responding to letters from prisoners, putting form letters into envelopes and doing mailings. This is all stuff that needs doing, and that we can also have a need for volunteers for. And the other thing is we can also serve as a resource for anyone interested in criminal justice and human rights issues. Here in the U.S., we work in coalition with a lot of other organizations in different parts of the country on very specific issues. Some organizations are a lot more narrowly focused than we are. We're pretty much a broad overview of the rights of the detained organization, specializing in media work. There's a lot of other organizations that focus on, for example, stopping sexual assault in prisons, the rights of mothers and parents in prison, and that type of thing. So they're doing even narrower stuff than we are. Then, of course, there's groups that are working against the death penalty, that are working for juvenile justice reform and stuff like that. So there's actually quite a bit out there, and unfortunately, it's a small field, and we tend to know everyone in it. And it's not that we're that well connected, it's just that there aren't that many people doing this work.
Thank you so much. This is going to be great.
Thank you
Thanks
very
for
much.
your time. You're the bomb.